So prosperity is happening at kind of the ascendant level. That's your very body. That means there's vitality there and sense of self-confidence, and you kind of know what you're all about. That's prosperous, isn't it? And by the way, that's not to say that that won't create money, because when you know what you're all about, you'll create whatever resources you need in order to live your life in a way you want to live it. That's the basic idea. This is the idea in working with prosperity. We could say prosperity practices. Often in Kundalini Yoga, they'll talk about prosperity practices. But I find that maybe, in my opinion, too much the emphasis is on, well, do this kriya and this effect is going to happen. Not that there's not some reality and truth to that. I've very much experienced that there is. But my preference of practicing is to be quite intentional with what my personal motivation is and what it is that I'm endeavoring to have blossom forth in my life. I don't know if that makes sense. So, let me give you an example. For instance, I could say, there's that famous Kundalini Yoga Kriya that we all do. It's not a bad one, that where they're doing this with the mantra. Some of you are familiar with it, some of you not. It doesn't matter. But the idea here is you're bringing Moon Center and Jupiter Center together. And we know astrologically, whenever you have a Moon and Jupiter in conjunct together, that you're going to have a flow of prosperity at some level. And depending on what kind of house that is happening in, or which influences which domains of our life will see that more at times than others. Making sense? So for instance, you might have a flow of prosperity in the context of relationship, then you have a relationship blossoming. So prosperity in the context of a career, well, then maybe you would see money coming through that. But prosperity is not just money. Prosperity looks like different forms depending on the domain of life that it's flowing through. Make sense? Simple, yeah? So prosperity is happening at kind of the ascendant level. That's your very body. That means there's vitality there and sense of self-confidence, and you kind of know what you're all about. That's prosperous, isn't it? And by the way, that's not to say that that won't create money, because when you know what you're all about, you'll create whatever resources you need in order to live your life in a way you want to live it. That's the basic idea. Is that it's not like, the horoscope will dictate what is going to happen. No, that shows us our tendencies. But then it's still my job. I can attune to anything I want to, because the whole zodiac is always there. It was there. The whole thing was there when we were all born. All the 12 signs, all the 12 houses, and all the planets. And so if I have something strong, that's just my more natural innate ability to kind of attune to that. So if I have Jupiter strong, the planet, like if you think prosperity, the first planet we would think of would be Jupiter, the giver, the teacher, the wisdom energy, like Santa Claus energy is Jupiter. Definitely Santa Claus is under the domain of Jupiter. There's no question about it. Who else is going to be able to not only bring so many gifts, but do it all in one night? So if you have a strong Jupiter, the sense that you'll be taken care of is typically naturally there. Doesn't mean that perfectly there, but relatively strong. You following me? Makes sense, right? But if I have a weak Jupiter, that doesn't mean I'm not going to get there. In fact, if there's some weak Jupiter, but I'm a yogi, then I'm going to actually have more motivation to work on that type of attuning to Jupiter energy. And so then, therefore, quote unquote, weak, strong. Weak and strong means, is that muscle, like if you're like ripped, and you have them like biceps, and you can like just easily lift something. That's strong. It's subjective. It's objectively strong. You can like lift 30 pounds, or you can't lift 30 pounds. This type of thing. So strong planets are kind of like you come with strong muscles, but that doesn't mean it's going to be beneficial. It just means you're going to have a strong muscle. What you do with the muscle is what makes it beneficial or non-beneficial always. So generally people would like to have a strong Jupiter, and you would say that would be beneficial. I'm kind of saying what most astrologers kind of say the opposite of. And not trying to be confusing, but I just look at it from a different lens and angle. Is where something's what they call inauspicious or unfavorable. That's from what perspective? It's from the perspective of our material life. Which is not to say that our material life isn't important. It absolutely is. If you don't have money to pay the rent, life is difficult. And if you're stressed because of money, life is more difficult, right? But if you take this other kind of approach and you say, well, you're just being real about the predicament you find yourself in. You know, hard to come by resources. That's a prosperity thing. You can look at prosperity in its different facets by looking at the main houses that have a lot to do with prosperity. The second house is a house of money. But it's really what it is a house of like in traditional cultures, it would be food. Because that would be how prosperous you are. Do you have food or do you not? How good is your food? Etc. And so, but this is like resource. So it's the ability, second house is the ability to manifest what you need when you need it type of idea. The fifth house is a prosperity house, but the fifth house has to do with what they call purva punya, which is kind of good, positive merit from previous lives or previous actions. So that's what you would say is like, quote unquote, luck. It's one of the good fortune houses. Is the fifth house. It's also a house of children and creativity, creative intelligence. And so then you have the ninth house, which is maybe in my mind, the primary prosperity house. So materially, even though we don't think really materially for the ninth house, because the ninth house is all about dharma. The ninth house is all about being in alignment with the flow of prosperity for your life. Because everyone's life has its unique flow of prosperity. It's how well can I get in the alignment that I'm being taken care of? And that's not just a philosophy, but that's something I'm in good harmony with. I'm in good relationship with. Make sense? So if I have a strong ninth house, then that'll be easier for me, just naturally. But I might take it for granted if I'm not actively paying attention to such things. I might not even notice it. Because how we are naturally, the muscles we came in strong with, this is just kind of how we are. Sometimes we even think that's how everybody is. And it's not always the case, is it? You kind of learn that later on. When do you typically learn it? Marriage. Relationships. All our different relationships is when we're intimately learning another person and how they operate behind the scenes, behind the curtains. That's what relationships are all about. Peel back the curtains. It happens in all sorts of ways. You know, you peel back the curtains, you get naked together, you make love, but you also peel back the curtains and all the vulnerabilities are shown. And this is why relationships are so powerful and so difficult, but so fruitful, aren't they? When the journey is really the blossoming of the self. And so therefore it's not codependency. It's mutual support. And sometimes mutual support brings things and keeps things together. Sometimes mutual support will set each other free. All of that. Prosperity in a relationship looks all sorts of ways. You look at it as a relationship stays together, prosperity, a relationship ends, prosperity. I don't think that's true. It's not my experience. So it's whatever is causing the natural blossoming of our lives and helping us become more truly prosperous. You know what I mean? And so when the ninth house, which is attunement to dharma, really, the river of life, the Tao, that also is a house of wealth. And so versus the second house is also a house of money, but the ninth house is a house of wealth. Versus second house ability to manifest what you need when you need it, or actualize what you need when you need it. The ninth house is it's like a house of grace. And so it's a true wealth, not just a wealth in the bank, although it tends to have that effect as well. Because it does. When you're attuned to that, it tends to have that effect as well. So prosperity in yoga it's not a stretch to say prosperity practices. Although if you look at it from afar, maybe it's Who knows what that seems like? You just think money or more money in the bank account or something like that. That's not what how I ever think of prosperity. I think of prosperity as the river of my life, and let me be in good alignment with it. And so a big part of that, and one of the reasons it's so hard to do that for all of us, is that means embracing the suffering of life as well, and not pushing that away, and not making the uncomfortable so-called negative things negative, not ultimately negative. We got to keep it real, be human beings, and nobody wants to suffer, nobody wants to get sick, nobody wants to be in sorrow, nobody wants to feel heartbreak. But we will. And so, then you just accept that. And you figure life must be about more than that, than just those ups and downs. And you find out what's in the space between that. So the tantric vision of things is that all of that is actually causing the blossoming of the self. Not just the Jupiter things, also the Saturn things. You see, Saturn is contraction, Jupiter is expansion. You can't have one without the other. And so therefore it's embracive of both. So when contractions are coming and everything feels cold and if bank account feels broke, maybe, or maybe even, and you may have, by the way, $50 million and the bank account seems broke. Why? Because you were used to having $800 million. For that person, and they get down to 50 million, like freak out time, right? Because those numbers change, they change as fast as ours, they're just way bigger. And so, so where is prosperity there? You know how stressful that must be? Oh my God, I don't even like losing $5. And so you throw 50 million and you're working with that, Not to say it has to be, but to all of that energy has a weight to it. And so do I have the strength to hold the weight of whatever that energy is that I'm working with will dictate how stressful it becomes to me. What are my muscles like in that regard? But we don't all need to lift 100 million pound, weights. We don't need those muscles. We just need, and in fact, that's kind of like it gets a little wonky, doesn't it? When it starts working with those types of numbers, and then people all over the place are suffering, and everybody's like, well, what the fuck is that all about? And we don't really know, because we never had that money ourselves. You see what I mean? It gets all weird and complicated, and we feel like these imbalances of money in the system, or just a few people holding so much of it, it's really weird. Something's off there, magnetically. And so the whole dance of the thing gets in, like, how can we make this world better? Well, it starts with our own relationship to this whole thing. Because what's going on in my own psyche regarding money, and this type of thing, what's going on in my own emotional relationship to flowing prosperity or lack thereof. So when there's lack thereof in whatever the domains of life there may be, health and disease, richness or poorness, so to speak, relationship or no relationship, children or no children. For some people, what? These are relative terms. Some people, prosperity is no children, right? And some people's prosperity is, I just want a baby. And it's both of those, isn't there? So prosperity is not one or the other. They're all relative things. And so thank God the kids moved out, And finally, after 25 years of raising 4 little kids, we're like, no kids. That's prosperity. And, really prosperity is then if they deliver grandchildren. True? That's totally. I only have 1. It's like, my odds are less for grandchildren. But I am hopeful. Who knows? My happiness won't sit on top of that, though. As human beings, we can even do that. Like our whole happiness sits too strongly upon like whether we get grandchildren or whether this happened or whether that happened. The Kundalini Yoga is just concerned with, do we know ourselves? Can we feel happy no matter what? Can we bring ourselves into living in such a way, with just little baby steps? Maybe we never get there, but we'll certainly blossom with every little baby step. But can we make it so that we're happy regardless of what's happening? What kind of like real type of state of being would that be? What would my heart be like if that was the case? If even in the most difficult and horrible times, and also in the most beautiful and happy times, if there was an inner blissfulness that never left me, what would that be like? What would that feel like if when I am encountering suffering? Because it has to encompass that. If it's going to stay around, it has to be able to be there when there's suffering there too. When there's the experience of pain, at least. Suffering's different. Suffering's the emotional response to the experience of pain. And so, if there's pain there and it still can hold all of that, what must that be like? Even when experiencing pain, maybe would my heart immediately, just very naturally, always respond with loving compassion? Maybe that's what it would feel like. That's kind of how I feel about it. You know, when I'm at my best and you encounter someone else's suffering, it's not a thinking, there's no judging, there's nothing but love. There's nothing but care and kindness and compassion. And inside that compassion, there's a wisdom there. And so in that way, both the pains and the pleasures can be embraced in a very practical, functional way. It's not just like spiritual philosophy. It's about working with the mind to be happy. It's like weaving a basket like that. That's why one of the definitions of tantra means to weave. It's weaving a basket that can hold all experiences in it. You see what I mean? While there's room for all experiences without throwing off your happiness. Interesting. It's cool. Phenomenal, really. And this is what all the kind of great yogic systems are built upon, these ideas. And then there comes the techniques to help that happen. Because we're just left to the mind only, then this takes, it's quite difficult. But if you get the body involved and you get the chi and the breath involved, you can bypass the whole thinking mind. Because what are we always doing with our thinking mind? We're judging ourselves. We don't feel as great about ourselves sometimes, or maybe we feel too great about ourselves in the more narcissistic case. All of these types of things. We bounce between those polarities. So when the exercises come in, the pranayama comes in, and then you say, give it a dristi, give it a point of focus with the energy that comes through your eyes. And when you put it in a single pointed position and move the prana with that, then all of a sudden you start to concentrate life force in the central nervous system. And typically, the life force tends to live out more on the periphery of the organism. Because why? Because life is always asking us to do things. I don't know about y'all lately, but my life's been asking me to do too many things. I'm so busy. I'm not having time to do really what I really want to do sometimes, and yet everything I'm doing is necessary. Sometimes life gets like that. It's like the motor's sped up somehow on the hamster wheel, and you have to be careful. But also there's like demands. It's like you can't not pick your kids up from school. That has to happen. And so forth and so on. So when life comes like that at us, then it's nice to have a way to kind of adjust, especially. But anytime it's a good way to be able to concentrate the life force, because then when we are interacting with all the demands of our life, we're doing it with a more centered system. Therefore, our body and mind doesn't have to work as hard to maintain its equilibrium, as that's what the organism is always endeavoring to do on all the levels: physical equilibrium, mental, emotional equilibrium, and even electromagnetic equilibrium, which is what you're working with when you're working with something like Kundalini Yoga, where you're working with the energy around the spine. Any yoga is working, not just Kundalini Yoga. Any system of Tai Chi or Qigong or any martial arts, they're all working with electromagnetism, of course. So you have a pole at the top or just above the head, and then you have a pole at the base of your spine. And the energy is always flowing between the two poles of our life, negative and positive, good and bad, masculine and feminine, so forth and so on. So then, if you have a dristi point, a point of focus, what's immediately going to happen? You're going to feel scattered, actually. Because now what you're doing is your mind's been going wherever it kind of wants to go all day long. And now you're saying, no, my mind, you're focused on this point right now. And the mind will immediately do what? Protest in all sorts of distracting subconscious ways, right? So if you're trying to do this stuff and you don't feel like you're able to do it, you're not doing it wrong, nor are you doing it poorly. You're just in the first step of doing it. And the first step is the most annoying step. That's why it's often hard to get going with a practice, because you're always starting in the more kind of distracted, less enjoyable disposition of the mind. I'm trying to get my mind to not look at the third eye point, or Lord have mercy, look at the tip of my nose or something ridiculous like this. And the mind is going to protest the idea of doing that. But then every time I notice the mind has drifted away, I take it back. And that's not what just happened there. My mind got distracted, and then I brought it back to the point of focus. That wasn't a correction of a mess up. That was a natural practice of harmonizing my mind, of gathering back my kind of inner energy. Do you see what I mean? Because just the act of saying to my mind, no, I'm in charge. The one who is the observing, intelligent love energy in the center, that me, that's what's in charge. And we're saying focused the gaze, the inner gaze, at the point where the root of the nose meets the skull bone. But even if I was saying, look only at that point on the floor, it's a concentration practice. And so then every time that happens, I notice my mind has gone over here. Naturally, that's how it will. Of course, there's all sorts of interesting things going on all over the place for the mind to go and to think about. So we're not saying like all this stuff out there is wrong and this is what's good. We're saying this is what we're doing now. And you're saying, now I'm going to take this. That's what a sadhana is called. It's when you're taking a practice or a kriya, you have it has a beginning, middle, and an ending point. It's not how we say we should operate all the time. It's saying in this particular practice, for these 7 minutes or these 11 minutes, whatever the case may be, do this. This is the point of focus. This is how the breath goes. This is how the body sits or moves. And then in that period of time, those are the only important things. All the philosophy's not important unless it's helping you stay focused more. You can remember why we're doing it in the first place, but at that point, it's trying to get past the mind altogether. In fact, you're saying, I'm not listening to the mind at all during this time. Sometimes creative wisdom will come through us. And you'll be in the middle of some kriya or some practice and you get creative inspiration. Fantastic. Try to remember it. But then back to the point of focus. You know, the creative inspiration will take you on a wave. It'll tell you what it needs to tell you. Fantastic. But then you're just back to the thing. And after time, it's not some rigid back to the thing. Over time, with practice of this stuff, it becomes softer. And there's not a certain like, oh, it went away and then it came back. But just kind of a softer relationship to that with the mind, to where it's just kind of learning to dwell in your own intelligence, learning how to dwell in your own intuitive energy, learning how to dwell in our own heart energy, learning how to dwell in our own witnessing energy, learning how to kind of dwell in the space between all those thoughts and how to kind of hold yourself in that space. Then the whole electromagnetism gets balanced. Then there's prosperity flow. There's no problem attuning oneself to the ninth house, so to speak. You see? And then whatever it is that is the river current of our life will be totally clear to us with time. Not necessarily do this one time and all of a sudden, boom. But if we more often than not, keep ourselves in that river flow, with time, all the things get taken care of, definitely. But we will doubt ourselves along the way, and we will doubt that it's being taken care of along the way. But that's not a problem either, because we're just experienced as the mind's cute doubting tendency. We're not trying to get rid of it, because that maybe is not realistic. Say you have, a bunch of... Anyways, I'll stop with the astrology. We'll just do some yoga. But you get the point, right? So my point on this is that instead of just relying on the Kriya to have its specific effects, like prosperity, or the many different ways that it's often described in Kundalini Yoga, to me it's always, you can make any activity or any Kriya prosperity Kriya if that's what you're endeavoring to attune to at that moment. But of course, aligning the effect of the Kriya with that intention is always a good idea, but certainly we don't need to be limited to that. To turn anything, you can work on the prosperity of relationship if that's what's aching your heart. It doesn't need to be money when we talk prosperity. But everybody in our life right now, our lives are asking for some prosperity somewhere. And so that's just being in good alignment with the overflowing cup. That's what I call it. That's what, to me, the ninth house is all about. It's what in the ancient India, they say the grace of the Guru. And also in modern India, the grace of the Guru. Is that the Guru is the ever-flowing current of love and wisdom. When Guru Nanak called it Pavan Guru, it travels to you via Pavan, the carrier of your breath. It's just by taking an exhale, and then do it again, and then exhale, and go again. And when you inhale, it's prosperity. And exhale, you give all of it away, though. Push it all out to where you then keep it out for a moment. Now you can easily trust that breath will be full. Now let it come in. So you see how the prosperity is not just an accumulation of things. That's why I tend to stay away from the word abundance. Prosperity is a circulation of things. Energy's coming, so energy can be utilized to serve in whatever the flow of your current is. All right, like this. Hey, thanks for watching on YouTube. Best easy way to stay in touch with us. Hit the subscribe button here. You'll see our videos when they come up. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button. It'll help more people see it, help the channel grow. I appreciate you watching.